What's up, everybody? We want to start this season finale episode with a quick channel update. As Crappy Reviews has grown, Rob and I want to make sure that our name better reflects how we approach the shows that we cover. So, going forward, Crappy Reviews will be Screen Sleuths. Same content, new name.
All that being said, you'll see this take effect in our next episode of our next new show, Sugar, starring Colin Farrell on Apple TV. Okay, all housekeeping aside, let's get into this finale of Constellation Season 1. Chris. I know this episode was a bit divisive across the fans. Let's start with our overall feelings about the episode and maybe a little bit about the season as a whole.
You go ahead and go first. Tell me what you think.
Me go first. Okay. I still really enjoy the show. I do think we, obviously, as everybody listening to us knows, we love a good mystery, trying to figure out clues, piece stuff together. So this has definitely not left us with a shortage of clues to try and figure out. And as a whole, I think that the show's been very good. It's been, as Apple has done through all the shows we've watched, they've produced it very well. There's been really good acting. Could I have gone for a little less introduction of mystery late in the season? Probably. I think we all had what we thought was a pretty good grasp on what was happening, and we kind of enjoyed that. But I still think I am still a fan of the show. I think with a possible season 2 coming, I will still be watching.
I agree. So I enjoyed the whole show. To your point, we love a good mystery. It gave me tons of material to keep digging into. And as I've reflected on the show more since the finale aired, I think the show kind of takes us on a little bit of a journey where in the beginning of the show, you see Henry with the cow and we get all the science stuff. They're just dropping quantum mechanics stuff and just exposing those theories to everybody that's probably never heard them. And as we read them, we all kind of felt confident, including myself and you. We're all feeling pretty confident. We know where things are going. And then as the show goes on, you go from feeling really confident about the science and how this is a science-based show. Then it kind of leans into a little bit of like we see some ghosts and we see references to some more woo-woo stuff and different consciousness aspects. And by the end of the show, we've kind of departed from the science completely and left ourselves in more of the mysticism and quantum consciousness and like the fringe theories. And I feel like the way we feel might have been more on purpose, where the characters in the show started off feeling really confident and in control of the situation, and Henry felt real good with his Nobel Prize, and he's got it under control with the cow. But at the end of the show, what it really means is we really don't understand this kind of science. There's a whole new world out there that is way beyond us, and the show's arc kind of takes us there from a scientific NASA lab opening to ending the show in a nunnery, and that arc is kind of felt throughout. So that's, after reflection, kind of how I feel about the show. All in all, I'm super looking forward to a season 2. I think without a season 2, it drops down for me a little bit, but given a season 2, I'm excited to explore more of the world.
Yeah, they definitely set this up for a season 2. We did not get the level of mystery we were left with at the end of this first season without an expectation of coming back to give more explanation. One of those being, and to the woo-woo a bit, we finally got the space zombie that I've been talking about.
ZJ?
We got the space zombie Joe. I've been waiting for the space zombie since we saw them on the ISS.
You've been talking about space zombies for a little bit now, so.
Listen, big horror fan. Didn't think we would get there, but we got a space zombie. I'll take it. Chris, I'll let you just kind of put some thoughts out there first of how, what, when, where, why could this Joe have been even moving, right? The Joe that we see in the ISS at the end.
Yeah, so after watching the scene at the very end when Zombie Joe moves, when she obviously is dead, it got me thinking, okay, who else has died in space and was left in space? Because that's the crux of, I think, our theory here. We have Joe and Valia both died and were left in space. And they bring up Laika earlier in the show, which is the dog that Russia, I guess the Soviets, had sent up and also died and was left in space. And the astronauts that go up there often hear barking when they go up there. They say it a few times in the show. When this happens in real life, astronauts mention they hear things and stuff like that. So right now we have Joe, Valia, and Laika. And all three died in space. All three were left in space. And it would seem that if you die in space and are left there, your body and your consciousness are left in liminal space, which is, as we've already talked about before, where the veil between universes or realities or the next dimension or whatever we're calling it at this point in the show is the most thin in these liminal spaces. So when you go up there, you die, your consciousness might still be floating around and still be active, and that's why they're interacting with people in dreams, and they can possibly reanimate's a strong word, but incorporate themselves back into their physical bodies, which might make sense in how Valia hit the space stations, or how Joe is able to grab the iPad, or how they still hear the dog barking up there, where in turn people like Paul and other astronauts that may have died in space that they haven't mentioned, but Paul for sure, was brought back to Earth, and we don't have this same kind of dynamic. So the key difference would seem to be if you die in space and then left in a liminal space up there, your consciousness may not die the same way it would if you were brought to Earth. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces. One that we've talked about a lot on the show, and then one just directly from the show that lend a little more credibility to it as well, is that the Schrodinger's cat theory, obviously we've talked about that a lot if you've listened to our other episodes talking about this season, and we feel space itself is kind of the box in this scenario, where we're always thinking about, oh, they died up there, they're dead. But if no one's up there to be present, see it, are they actually dead, right? So there's a little bit of that played into it as well. And then both Alice and, correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, right?
Yep.
Also asked the same question, because Alice asked it very early in the show, talking about when Joe was going to go
Right,
up
I
in
think
space.
she's asked it 2 times, but yeah, earlier in the show.
Yeah.
If you die in space, do you die on Earth?
Half alive and half dead is better than all dead. Maybe some people can be there and not there.
It's been the question itself has been stated multiple times. I'll put it that way. I know Alice was one of them, and it was, if you die in space, do you die for real? Because she was worried about Joe going up. And I think at the time it seemed like a very offhanded, her child's asking a question, she's concerned, it just kind of showed the relationship. But I think in hindsight it was kind of a telling question that they died in space. Maybe they didn't fully die for real, that their consciousness is still hanging on to an extent. One of the things we think we may have nailed down as well, or at least something along the lines to keep an eye out for, especially in season 2, is the people we have seen complete the full flip of consciousness are ones that we've seen have a full death or near death experience in space, and Henry and Bud, who, according to the tape that we heard, we believe might have probably had a near-death experience when they had the shuttle accident. And the reason being, when that near-death experience is occurring, they are the closest to the veil of consciousness between their two realities. That they are detached from their physical body, might be the way to say it, because of that near-death experience more than any other time, allowing them to make that flip of consciousness between the realities.
I 100% agree. I think that goes back to the whiteboard that we see in episode 4, when Henry writes stress and trauma, and then death in space, and then lithium, and that whole scene. I think he's realizing that, and we already talked about this on numerous occasions, we're big advocates. Trauma, emotion, all that stuff plays a giant role in when they're either switching or at least like peering through the veil, right? The more trauma and the more that's happening to you emotionally, the more you're glitching between realities, and Death in Space was also on there. So that totally tracks. And I am convinced, at least as far as you can be convinced in the show, that the idea that dreams are not portals, but times when we're able to peer in or communicate with other realities is probably being used as fact in this show.
I had nightmares.
What is she?
She's a dream.
It was my dream that I might one day go into space myself.
Between Wendy, between Alice, when they see Valia, we see it in the episode 7 at the end when Alice is sleeping in the hospital and she has a dream about Valia and they communicate there. And then we also see Paul in episode 8 wake up from, one, to your point, a near-death experience. And during that time, he's in this dream-like state and he's able to see or communicate or do whatever it might be. And I think there probably is a learning curve to this, because someone like Valia, who's been floating around for 30 plus years, has most likely gotten a lot better and more comfortable with the state that she's in than someone like Paul or Joe, who's been, maybe a month or a month and a half getting used to how this kind of works. So I think the idea that dreams are a part of this, maybe to your point, dreams being level 1 and death being level 10. And the more you go on this spectrum, the more the switching and communication can happen. Dreams allow you to see things and interact a little bit, and death is a potential switch kind of situation.
So we've talked a lot about people not making it back from space, but let's talk about birth and the start of life.
Oh boy.
And the potential of Joe giving birth.
Oh boy.
Oh, that was a good one, and you know it. Chris, I think we agree on the outcome of her being pregnant right now, of what that's causing. The other thing that I think we need to talk about is potentially how she got pregnant. I'll say I think we agree that the baby itself is keeping Joe 1 foot in each reality.
I agree. I think if you want to talk about how the baby was conceived, we probably should do it offline.
You know that's not what I meant, you weirdo.
Yeah, I think that. So my best explanation for what happened was most likely when Joe got back and her and Magnus had that moment in the hotel, the point where he was surprised and she's asking him, do I seem the same? And they were clearly intimate in the scene. That most likely is the scene where the baby was conceived. And then the ultrasound image, which matches almost identically to what the Cal readout was on the tablet. So I'm calling it baby Cal because I feel like it serves the same function for Joe, where although the Cal was smashed in this symbolic way of splitting realities and the tape breaks and the link between things is shattered, the baby that Joe's having is keeping that link alive, at least for her. I don't know if it extends past that, but at least for her.
We think that's very obvious by what she's seeing, and more specifically what she's seeing from each eye. So Chris made a very good call on the point that when they shine the pen light in her left eye, which as we know is the eye affected on her other body, it doesn't react the way it does, the same way it does on her right eye, or how you would normally expect. But also, what she's seeing out of her right eye is Irina and what we would normally see within this reality, but her left eye is the one that we're seeing that gets glimpses of Valia in the suit with the mask broken. That's where she's seeing this different reality version. And on top of that, pretty easy to point then to when she is exploring around the compound and she finds the man locked up in the room, and she sees the two versions. She's seeing one with her right eye, which is one reality, the other with her left eye, which would be the other reality. By having the baby, she's able to see both realities.
And on the topic of the other patient in the cell upstairs that Ilya and Irina both allude to, Irina says that it's the first man in space, but the first man in space, if you were to Google it right now, is Yuri Gagarin. Yuri Gagarin died in 1968. He was Russian, USSR, but he died in 68. During this scene where the ISS crew was going to see Paul's tree in that cemetery-like area, Ilya talks about a conspiracy that Yuri wasn't the first person in space and Vladimir Ilyushin was the first person in space, but he crashed in China and they grabbed him and brought him back and it was an embarrassment and they ended up locking him up. And we're pretty sure, at least me and Rob are pretty sure, that the person that we're seeing up there is Vladimir, the actual first person in space that he alludes to in this conspiracy a couple episodes earlier. But being that he's the first person, this condition of of switching realities or having whatever this condition is that they're calling astronaut burnout. They have no idea how to treat it, and it just went untreated for years. All they could do was lock him up, and it's gotten to the point where, he's a complete lost cause, just out there in his own thing. So I'm glad we brought up conspiracy, because on the tagline it says reality is a conspiracy. Me and you have alluded to conspiracy for the past couple of weeks. We think we have a pretty good idea of what may be going on. So in the last episode, we saw some character personality changes and maybe saw some people's true colors and what they might really know. What do you think the conspiracy is? Do you think that everyone's in on it? Do you think it's just the agency's high-level leadership? Like, where do you fall on what do you think the conspiracy might be?
I think the way you said it is probably where I'm at. It's the high-level leadership within the agencies. They are sending people to space knowing that not all, but a lot of cases, people come back and they've cracked. Basically.
Yeah, there's a high risk of
they've
this.
gone mad. Yeah.
This we're calling an astronaut burnout, but we know what we mean when we say that. This
Right.
like flippity doo dah happens.
And they continue to send people up there because there's something they want to gain by doing it. Even though they're basically saying the risk is worth it. The juice is worth the squeeze on this, but not telling them. And then when they do experience this, they're medicating them until it works, or the extreme cases like we're seeing with Joe, they get sent away and taken care of and just basically pushed to the side and hidden.
I agree 100%. They're basically using these people as cannon fodder. After Vladimir came back and he was all kooky, I understand you don't really know what you're dealing with yet. They haven't experienced this kind of problem yet. But after a while, this happened more and more. And for whatever reason, they just keep sending people up there. If they knew and cared, they'd stop sending people up there because there's a high probability that you're going to have this kind of problem. But they keep doing it. Not only did they do it, they built a permanent laboratory in liminal space, which I obviously think they're doing other experiments that we would, that astronauts do. But I feel like the ISS's sole purpose was most likely to have a laboratory in liminal space to test these kind of things out, to see what's going on. And I think it's to my point earlier in this episode where how much we really don't know about things. I feel like it's the same thing. We send things up there just because humans by nature like to poke the bear. So we went up there, we saw something cool, and instead of saying we're not going to send people, we're like, no, we're going to build a space laboratory, and we're going to go and really see what happens up there and mess with things. And I feel like that's what the conspiracy is, because we see Irina's character make a pretty big shift. In the beginning, they sell her as the Wicked Witch of the West, right? She's mean. We think that she's controlling Valia and all this kind of stuff. And at the end, she's much more nurturing, and she's just kind of saying, look. And this, by the way, too, I've read quite a few comments, and one of the major knocks on this episode was this big, massive character shift on some of the characters and how Irina's totally different, and Joe and Alice just kind of gave up and blah, blah, blah. But that's not what happened here, right? Irina never changed. Irina was always like this. But if we look at it in retrospect, she's playing a role, and she's acting out the same advice that she gives Joe in the room, that you need to be this new person. You have a life here. You need to act on it. You need to move on, and that'll help. And the more that you try to fight back, the more it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, right? You have things here. And I think that we see her being more nurturing and trying to tell her, because in the beginning, when she's first there, she's just like, take your pills, it's going to get worse. And then after a while, she sits down, like takes off her glasses, and she doesn't say it, but she gets damn close to just being like, look, you're stuck here. I'm dealing with this. A lot of people are dealing with this. Don't fight anymore. And for the people that are thinking like Joe and Alice, how could they just do that? This has been a month of not knowing if you're legitimately crazy or if something that is so wild just happened to you. Eventually you kind of break and accept this. That doesn't mean next season that they're just going to leave it to Beaver the whole season and she's fine with it. But both her and Alice are trying to deal with this emotionally. And it'd be ludicrous to think that they could stay at 11 high gear fighting this forever. She'd be stuck in that room just like the dude upstairs. She has to kind of like roll with this, because if the solution is being crazy and being stuck in that room or accepting a life that is pretty normal, I don't understand how there would even be a choice. So Yeah, I think the conspiracy is that we went up there and we're messing with stuff. And we built this laboratory and we're just sending people up there just to test things out. Because the cow was built for millions of dollars. We brought this up a couple episodes ago that cow just didn't get built in his garage, right? He had a team of people doing that. He had to show why he wanted to do it, what the potential uses would be, to get the funding to do this, and to use what limited space you have on a spacecraft to bring it up and all this kind of stuff. So I feel like this is kind of part of it. They knew, they went with it, and it further proves the point that I think this is us messing with things that are probably outside of our control and knowledge.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chris. I don't think I could have said it better myself. But guys, this is our theories on the show. We've pieced together the clues as best as we could. But go into the comments. Let us know what you think, your theories, and if there's anything else that maybe we haven't touched on that you want to get our take on or your thoughts on, drop it in the YouTube comments. We're happy to respond. But that's going to wrap up our post-season finale thoughts on Constellation Season 1. We hope you enjoyed our content for this show, the shows we've covered before, like From and The Changeling, and we look forward to you coming with us on more investigations into sugar and the future.
And as always, if you enjoyed our content, please like and subscribe to let us and the algorithm know. And remember to look out for us under our new name, Screen Sleuths.